Awesome. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to make sure we're on time. We have a lot of knowledge to drop on you today through from all of the participants in the contest. Honestly, we all learned so much. So the time has come. You know, we gather here today in Dr. von Brunswick's chocolate factory to celebrate all of our spreadsheet gladiators, but most importantly, the winners of the challenge, who will earn not only eternal bragging rights, but also some pretty sweet bundles of cash. But before I chat about the cash, please allow for the quickest name drop ever. You'll see on your screen right now, our team at Coefficient offers a sidebar app for Google Sheets. Coefficient connects to any data source and imports live data into your Google Sheets, empowering teams to connect all their data, automate workflows, and share live insights within the spreadsheet platform of their choice. So now that our one and only infomercial is over, let's get this show started. Hop to the next slide. Awesome. Over 500 spreadsheet pros joined our first spreadsheet challenge, all in hopes of winning $5,000 by building the ultimate sales dashboard in Google Sheets. Using pre-supplied Salesforce CRM data, the bravest among those registrants built a sales dashboard in Google Sheets, tracking deals, sales performance, and core KPIs for the mysterious Dr. von Brunswick's global chocolate empire. 49 final submissions and 3,772 votes later, 5 finalists were put to the ultimate challenge. So our panel of spreadsheets and sales RevOps experts judged the finalists based on our code of honor and have come together to award the $5,000 prize to the winner, and of course, the couple of secondary prizes we have as well. So just to introduce our judges before they take the floor, our Emperor of Spreadsheets, Ben Collins, founder of Collins Analytics. RevOps for Romulus, Heidi Thompson, VP of Go-to-Market Strategy and RevOps at Unqork. And our very own spreadsheet slayer, Frank Ferris, Templates Program Manager here at Coefficient. Frank, I'll let you take it away.
Amazing. Thanks for that introduction, Hannah. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Frank. I'm the Templates Programmer Manager at Coefficient. I spend a lot of my days in Google Sheets, as I have in past jobs. So I absolutely love Google Sheets, and I'm so excited because what can be more fun than digging into Sheets formulas for the next half hour or so. And as Hannah mentioned, we have such a great lineup of judges here. No one has a better representation on Google Sheets than Ben Collins, of course. Everyone's familiar with his blog, and he's helped me personally a ton through his blog and everything I've learned in my past jobs in Google Sheets. But a Google Sheet, as fancy as they may be, is only as useful as it is in terms of how it answers the questions we want to ask. And that's why it's great to have Heidi here to keep us honest and make sure that these fancy sheets are actually answering the right questions. So here we have it, the first reveal of the top 5 finalists that made it to this round based on our public voting process. So received tons of votes, tons of amazing submissions. I'm sure it was very hard for everyone to choose who to vote for. But here we have the top 5 that we'll be reviewing today, digging into each one. I've saved my own copy of each one, so I have full edit access to explore them and dig deep into your formulas and see what we can find. And we'll have one honorable mention that didn't make the top 5 in terms of votes, but was just so fantastic that we have to share it with you all. Before we start diving into the spreadsheets, let's talk a bit about the judging criteria that the 3 of us judges used to determine the top 3 winners out of the 5 that were chosen by the public. So we had 3 categories. First, analysis, so the depth, accuracy, and sophistication of analysis and formula. Design, aesthetic, and functional presentation of data and visualizations. So both the aesthetic side, but also the functional side. It's very important that we're kind of including both of those and trying to get the right balance of fancy Google Sheets and utility. And finally, creativity, novelty of approach, innovation, and unexpectedness. If we're going to dig through 50 spreadsheets that are submitted, we really want to see something that's going to stand out and hopefully see something that we haven't seen before in spreadsheets. And I think we've seen a few very good examples of that in the ones that we'll go through today. Awesome. Just before we jump into the actual spreadsheets, just to give everyone some context in case you weren't a participant in the competition, This is the challenge that we sent out to all our potential gladiators. So we shared this public spreadsheet with everyone to make their own copy of. We set up for them just one simple basic Salesforce opportunities import, obviously using coefficient to get the data into the spreadsheet. But this would be all the common fields that you would see for Salesforce opportunities object. And then from there, the gladiator contestants had to add their own formulas to the data import if they needed to. And the final task was to create one final dashboard that fits on one tab. So this is kind of a placeholder for that, where they could build out the nicest and most useful dashboard they could. And the one other limitation was no use of app script, which could have radically changed some of the submissions that we would see. So we're going to start off with our honorable mention. Max Makarov did not, unfortunately, get into the top 5 in terms of votes, but the 3 of us judges were just blown away by this one. So we have no choice but to show it off a little bit. Creativity, definitely 100% score in that one. This one, as you can see, is very thematic to our theme of a chocolate factory. Everything is very, is just built around that theme in a very creative way. And for those of you who might not be as familiar with spreadsheets, there's some things we should point out about this one here. So first of all, you might notice that normally where we would see all of the column names like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, these are all squished together. I think there's 539 columns and 138 rows making up this dashboard. And that is so that we can have pixel art, which I believe Max put together using the free Google Sheets add-on pixel art that can turn any image into a spreadsheet image. But he still clearly did a ton of work to make this more dynamic. Everything that might just look like still images here, I should point out all of these bitten pieces of chocolate at the end. These are all proportionally calculated based on the amount of sales that each rep has made. As I play a little bit with these toggles that are here, if I uncheck one, we'll see the chocolate pieces actually shifting. Even this fudgesicle is changing in size. And even more impressive to me, I think, was this nice touch of this geographic map, which is again built in a similar way. And all of these heart images are actually adjusting to different sizes depending on the level of sales in each country and where they're located on the map. So yeah, just a very impressive, incredibly creative, absolutely love this, Max.
Yeah, well done, Max. We were looking for things that were unexpected, and this was certainly unexpected. And yeah, it's all done with conditional formatting. So I don't know if you want to just open that up, Frank, maybe just to really sort of explain that. You'll see that every one of those brown squares has a different value corresponding to the shade of the color of that little sort of dot, if you like, that pixel. So very, very clever to do that, for sure.
Yeah, very awesome. And as everyone knows, if you voted for any of the contestants, you'll be able to see their spreadsheet URLs online. So if you catch anything that you think is interesting that you want to try to redo, feel free to make copies of spreadsheets and dig into how they're actually set up in the back end. In this case, just to show quickly, we have a tab with all these shapes and numbers representing different shades, as Ben mentioned, to kind of power the whole back end of this. We have, yeah, again, creative emojis instead of country names. So as long as you can tell which emoji represents which country, you can use those as filters. A colorized version is another fancy little touch. And then where we get into the actual RevOps part of this really is this little screen here that can answer a few different questions for us. Again, very creatively done. If you're a sales manager, this could be an exciting way to look at your data, but maybe not always the most practical way to dig in. You can see how are we going, is current sales, why do we lose, closed lost reasons, who ate my chocolate or the top accounts. Very clever. And again, it looks like a fun little image, but it's all really accurate and nicely organized.
I absolutely love it because it keeps it simple. Need that for sales managers.
That's the thing. There's trade-offs of making the most practical dashboard or something fun that people will actually want to come back and visit every day. On that part, one part that I love that I should maybe incorporate into more of my dashboards is there's this nice little Easter egg here, Does She Love Me? And it's using a randomly generated poem. So I think there's 3 different poems that can show up here. And and it's a different one each time. It reminds me of when you log into Slack or some other places and they show you a motivational quote each day. That randomness of something new each time can make people come back regularly. And again, this is all changing depending on the question. Yeah, really, really creative, amazing submission, Max. Awesome. And now we'll jump into our first of the top 5 finalists. Mavani, and apologies to anyone if I'm mispronouncing names. I'll do my best throughout here. So this dashboard, to start a bit with the design, has a very beautiful aesthetic to it, I'd say, very clean and crisp. A lot of small touches that you might only notice if you've been working with spreadsheets for a long time, but the way that all of these headers above the charts have some borders, kind of draws everything together in a clear view, makes it very easy to read. Nice use of slicer filters that I think are connected to pivot tables in the back end. And just a very nice, cleanly organized view. I think one thing that'll come up a lot is a major difference people had to choose from in their submissions was how to have filters on their dashboards. Of course, any powerful dashboard is going to have the ability for the user to interact and filter in different ways. Usually that's done with either slicer filters like this or with drop-down cells that have validation rules. Ben, do you have any thoughts on the pros and cons of the two types of filters?
Sure. So I think, I like these slicers because you get more options. You can choose multiple choices at once. You're not limited to just a single choice. You can also do filter by condition. For example, text contains something that you want to then see all those examples. So you do get a lot more control with the slicers, but they don't sort of play nicely with or as easily with your formulas. They feel because they float on top of your dashboard, sometimes they can move around and they don't kind of stick exactly where you want them. So they both have pros and cons. I would try and use slicers when I can for that control aspect I talked about, but they, as I said, they work better with pivot tables than the drop downs tend to work better with the formulas. So it kind of depends how you've set up your back end as to which one might work better for you. Another thing I like with dashboards as well is I like to have all of the controls grouped kind of in one place like this. It's really nice then, I think, to say, okay, what filters have I set for my dashboard? It does depend. I think if you have ones that are specific to, say, just a single chart, you might move it right next to that chart and leave it there. But I think if they're global filters that are controlling the whole look of the dashboard in one go, it's a really good idea to group them like this, either in a side panel or up along the top, as we'll see in one of the other ones. So this was nicely done. And I think, Heidi, you were mentioning actually that the categories used in this dashboard for these filters were well done as well.
These are my favorite filters out of all the ones we saw. This was the most relevant to, if I'm meeting with the CRO, I would want these filters. I genuinely appreciated them. Actually, they were my favorite, as I said, of all of them. There were still a couple of things that made it a little tricky to navigate. The spark lines underneath, I still don't know quite what they represent. So I would recommend just adding text saying what they are. If you filter to a year, there's sometimes 7 bars, sometimes 12, 13. So I wasn't quite sure there. And then also, fun little story about me. I used to work at a data science software company, and in my first board prep meeting, I presented a few 3D charts, and I believe there's some 3D charts if you scroll down. And I'll tell you that I will never use a 3D chart again as long as I live. The founder made fun of me pretty much. There's many articles out there on why you should never use a 3D chart. You should probably Google it. It's actually kind of funny when you look. It really comes down to that it's considered a bad practice because it negatively affects the accuracy and speed on how you interpret the graphics. So I'm always cautious against those. I will never use them in a board meeting ever again for fun. I learned the hard way. So just that I would recommend changing. And there was also, if you scroll up just a little bit, the chart right here, stage-wise pipeline, albeit a really great representation of the categories, I would recommend keeping them whole and true to their numbers, because once you do, you'll actually notice some poor hygiene that this is masking by using this as a 100% bar chart. I only use 100% bar charts when I want to cover up a problem, quite frankly, and make a number look good. So I do cautions against those as well when you're trying to identify the truth. If you switched it, you would actually see there's a deal in negotiation out in 2024, and that represents or indicates poor pipeline hygiene, and that's something you want to unmask with the true results.
Yeah, I think that's a really good find and a good point to make, because you can see how drastic the difference is here. It looked like we had, you know, an even representation of all of these with the 100% stack chart, but obviously very low numbers for future quarters. Maybe intentionally being masked.
Yes, true.
As you say. I think we found something similar down here with this stack chart as well. Again, a little bit hard to compare totals between all of these sales reps or teams in this case, right? This one too, I think, was a good example where if we switch it, you can see some drastic differences that you wouldn't be able to tell unless you were really looking at each number for each stack.
Yeah,
and,
I think with
final,
those 100% ones, you either go all in on the you know, its percentage, and it will show then the relative sort of you know, for each group how their pipeline is looking, and you just leave off the numbers, just so it's a case of saying, okay, these ones are a bit over-indexed on potential sales, and need to start closing a few more. If you're going to put the actual numbers in, they need to be absolute, well, at least the actual amount, so you can say, you know, the 4.8 million versus the 2.4 million and see the actual sizes of the bars, because otherwise you're seeing them, they look the same size, but you've got different numbers on them, which can lead to some confusion. But overall, yeah, I thought this was a really nice design on this dashboard. And one other thing, Frank, that we haven't talked about actually was those quick links to the filters, which was really clever. That was a really nice touch. So yeah, you want to show that?
You want to explain how that's working?
Yeah, so these are, so when you add filters to your data, you know, you can say, I want to look at just everything from group A, or everything from group B, or the region to the north or the south. You can filter your data down to a smaller subset. And one thing you can do is add filter views, which allow you to save one of those set of filter sets. So you can create this subset, and then you can go and grab that link and then just go and add that you know, in the dashboard as a quick link to get to this filter, which then just is a really nice way to let people jump in and see that filtered view quickly if they was going to see that data for that particular setup. So, you know, for your team, you might say, well, these are the 5 filter views we look at all the time. Let's create those quick links so we don't really have to go back and dig through the data and set those filters up every time ourselves. Just a nice touch to save some time then.
It's incredibly useful. I can't tell you how many very late night calls I've had from a CRO saying, hey, can you send me the underlying data? I'm not sure I trust your numbers. Well, to be honest, my numbers are right, but you just don't want to see behind it. So
and it's just grabbing that URL at the top there with, you see it's got that fvid with number at the end there. I think that just will give you the filter view. So you would grab that and then just do a hyperlink, your regular hyperlink in on your dashboard there.
Yeah, exactly. So if we switch from, right now we're on the one sales filter view, and if we switch to the pipeline highest lowest filter view, as Ben mentioned, you can see the URL changing, which is super handy to include links. And one last thing to mention about this one, we do have a lot of dashboards to go through today, so we're trying to move it along. But a great reason to use both slicer filters and filter views is that both of these tools can be used with view-only access. So for all the people that were judging these spreadsheets without making their own copies necessarily, you can still control these, which is also nice because you can have multiple members of a team accessing the same dashboard, filtering it in different ways without affecting each other's views. Okay, Hannah's giving me the nod to speed along a little bit. So great submission though, Manaday, really loved it. Okay, this is from Sebastian. And here we have again, a nice clean view. Looks like a well-organized setup of a dashboard. Great use of like a variety of tools like spark lines, KPIs at the top, a variety of charts. And in this case, we're using the alternative filtering method, which would be to have drop-down cells with validation rules to tell you what you're able to choose here. and a nice, I think, clean breakup view of we have closed deals at the top, and all of these charts relate to the closed deals section, and then open deals down at the bottom here.
Yeah, I like the design of this one. It's nice and simple, and it just felt like it gave you the answers, quickly, which is really what all the dashboards should be doing. We don't build these for fun, or sometimes, but not. We shouldn't really. But a dashboard is there to serve you, not the other way around. So it should be simple. It should be something where you can answer the questions you're trying to get. And so I really like that Sebastian made this opinionated decision to split into closed and open. Just say, right, that's how we look at our data. I'm going to show those charts separately in different sections, and then it gives you a really nice, clear idea of what you're looking at. And he's used a nice layout where everything's just, again, it's clean, everything's well presented. Perhaps only the spark lines at the very top that didn't have any context to them. But again, I'm assuming that if you were familiar with this data, that would probably be more meaningful in a sense of just giving you an indication if you're going up or down in recent period. But again, you might want to just have some label here that just says spark lines represent a 6-month period, or whatever they represent, just to be even just a little note, underneath the closed deals there or something. Just
I would also recommend adding a date filter. You do have a date chart, but for all the other questions, you could see by date. If I would have that option, what were the top sales won by country for this time period? So a time period to the top. Sebastian actually asked if you go to the to date filter to clear that out, please.
Yeah, I just saw his message on the chat coming through too.
Great.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is one nice touch I noticed about using these drop-down filters. One thing you can't do with slicers, or it would be very tricky to do at least, is to have a variety of metrics to choose from, which I thought was kind of cool. So depending on how you want to look at the data, you can look at dollar amounts, average deal size, average close, age of the opportunity, win rates, and all of the charts will filter to or adjust to show the different metrics that we might look at.
There was something that, I'm sorry, bothered me. If you scroll down, as a RevOps leader, the expected sales, that term of expect, to me, and this is just the subject, it has nothing to do with the spreadsheet, but if I were a CFO or CRO who I report into and they see expected sales, that to me means what we literally expect to come in. This is truly pipeline sales, everything in the pipe versus what is expected to come in. So I would just rename it to pipeline. That would be some great expected sales.
Yeah, it's a great thought. Awesome. And yeah, one last piece I noticed was part of the downside of having these filters in two different sections as opposed to global filters is that I think it wasn't always clear to me which sections I'm filtering with these. Like if I change these filters here, I'm also filtering the numbers above it. It might be clear once you start using the dashboard a little bit that it's the numbers above and everything else below. But sometimes you could be looking at very different filters for closed and open opportunities, and it could cause confusion.
Yeah, I think that was one point actually I was going to make as well, Frank. I think, again, I think all of these dashboards, if you use them regularly, you would know exactly how to work them and what to do. Personally, I probably would put the controls together just to sort of make sure everybody can see, all of the controls at once and know what they do, because it is easy to miss them when they're sort of buried a little bit. If you go down there, one other thing I wanted to mention actually with the charts, just here, these line charts, I think the color scheme is really nice, where you've used that gradient effect. And that can be a really nice way, rather than 5 different colors, which can be a bit glaring. It's a really nice effect here, just if you've got, say, 4 or 5 different series, is to just do this gradient type color scheme. I use that a lot myself, actually. I think it adds it's a nice design touch.
And I believe this is one of the few dashboards that had expected sales by next step. That's truly valuable, particularly the blinks, because those are the ones I'd be most concerned about if they don't have a next step. So I love that circle graph.
Here we go.
Very clever.
Awesome. Great job, Sebastian. Moving along to Katey's submission. So this one has a lot of stuff going on as soon as you get into it. I thought it was quite exciting to see. I'll just start with a few of my own observations. So a nice dashboard setup. It's quite long, so we didn't put any rules about how long a dashboard can be. But I think we kind of make that work by having this top navigation with these menu buttons here, where you can jump ahead basically to any row in this dashboard that's predefined. So you can jump into the geo maps. It'll take you to row 85 and so on. I think these could be a little bit more clear that these are toggles or buttons to navigate through the dashboard, but a very effective setup. And again, kind of like what Max had on his dashboard with colorize, here we have some coloring options. So grayscale mode, which will change all of the colors to grayscale. You can't control chart colors with that, but most of it will change. And I know the author of this spreadsheet wrote in her notes that this was partly to make it accessible to the colorblind. I'm colorblind myself, so she might have known that I'm a judge and was catering to me, but I was impressed with that nice little touch.
Genius.
And then besides grayscale mode, there's also the option to switch between color mode or print mode. So I think print mode again is more like a grayscale, easier to print with less ink. I guess not having the whole background color helps.
Yeah, so I think, sorry, Frank, do you want to keep going?
No, please.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to say actually here with this one. There's so many interesting things. So I want to start actually with the data cleaning summary tab. I think, this is something I teach with students and things. I think Katey's done a really nice job here of just explaining what this, the steps she's taken to build this dashboard. It really helps if, someone else inherited this dashboard and had to start maintaining it or keep going with it, just to know, the thought process behind it, how Katey's done it. So that was a nice touch to see. And if you can scroll down and just see how detailed this is, actually, she's really explaining sort of everything she's done, the formulas she's used. It's a nice audit trail as well, if anybody had to sort of try and recreate some of it. So that was great to see. Then back on the dashboard, again, lots of things to say here. The use of these freeze panes. So Katey's frozen the top rows and the first few columns just to lock, because as if Frank scrolls down now, those buttons stay in place. So you can always get back to any other part of the dashboard. So that's really a nice technique to use actually to kind of lock that top row. So if your dashboard is quite long, you don't lose that header. And those buttons really, I think that was something we hadn't seen before. That's really, really clever to jump around your dashboard there to the different sections. So that was really impressive. Nice to see all of the controls together. Katey's gone with the drop downs, and I think she's got some pretty crazy formulas going on in the background. So the drop downs will probably work better with that rather than pivot tables.
One nice touch I saw.
Back to Frank and Heidi for a moment. I've got a few other things to say, but I'll let Frank and Heidi talk.
I love the errors personally. So if you check off one of the other targets, I do think dumbing it down for every dashboard, especially if you're handing it to sales leaders, is super important. And if you check off actually 2 check boxes, it errors for you. Only one. Yeah. I really, really like that. I think that was great guidance. I just feel like this dashboard, every single question that I could come up with in my mind about the data set is here somewhere. It might take a while to find it, but it is answered here somewhere. So I definitely liked that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, one part with all the formulas that impressed me that I hadn't thought of doing before, and the author mentions this in her notes, is that this is also cat and toddler proof. And by that, she means if someone actually accidentally comes in, maybe your VP or whoever, and deletes everything, it'll all pop back up in a second. That's a very nice touch using a query formula that I think is hidden up in one of these cells. And basically this entire dashboard is replicated as a hidden dashboard over here, which is also a bit of genius of its own, kind of what Ben was saying with the cleaning tab, where it makes it very clear if a developer were to take over this dashboard, it would be very complex and difficult for a new person to update and maintain. But having a tab like this with explanations for every formula that's found in it is just beautifully organized. I've never seen this level of organization powering the back end of a dashboard before. Yeah.
The one
quite
thing I
impressed
would
with that.
ask for as a RevOps leader selfishly is with all your data prep work, which is very impressive, share that back to your RevOps peers so that they could actually import that into Salesforce and clean the data. Even if it's a one-time clean, it's very valuable for the greater organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there was some of that with in the data cleaning tab, I think. We have some of the cleanup is related to renaming things. So like if there's misspellings of USA, United States of America, different spellings, it'll group it all together. And all of the background is, there's another main import tab somewhere, but it's basically using all dynamic references to named ranges that are dynamic. So even if someone were to adjust the Salesforce import, which is this coefficient import tab, if someone were to add new columns to this import, the spreadsheet's set up in a smart enough way where it's not just looking for column 1, 2, and 3, for example, but it's actually going to search this import for the columns by the right name. So if I edit this import and add in account region or account industry or some other fields and change the order of these on the import, the dashboard's set up in a smart enough way to adjust for all of that, which is very clever. We all know how easy it is for someone to break one of these dashboards if it's not set up in the right way.
100%. And I agree with Glenn and Ann's comments. I mean, the documentation, I could drool over this, but what else is really great, aside from I love business documentation, is I could go into a meeting with this, and instead of saying, oh, hey, Mr. CFO, let me go ask them and I'll get back to you. The question of what does this mean? I can just go to the tab in the meeting, keep my time productive and effective. So I think that was a really great job on the documentation. And I agree, I have no idea how long that took.
Yeah, very, very clever. Definitely, really. I think this is a dashboard you could dig into for days to discover new things.
Yeah.
I think that is really interesting, actually, that you, as you showed there, Frank, you can delete basically the dashboard and it just pops right back up. You can't get rid of it.
Yeah.
If I was going to say, you know, maybe is there anything to improve here? I think there are a few things. I think that the design element of this one perhaps wasn't as strong as some of the others. I think some things sort of, you know, there was so much going on, your eye didn't really kind of settle on one place. It's saying this is, you know, the dashboard kind of flows and that, you know, through. It's perhaps not as clean as some of those others. There are some charts like that sales rep 3D pie chart that, again, you know, it's floating there without any context really.
Those 3D pie charts.
So that particular one, you know, again, it doesn't add anything to this at all, because you just, you know, you can't take anything from that 3D pie chart. It doesn't give you any, you know, without, you can hover over it, that's true. But I think if you're going to have a chart, it has to be labeled so that somebody can look at it and instantly say, right, I know what information I'm getting from that chart. So just the design, you know, definitely, I think could be improved. And then the only other thing I'll say is that with a dashboard this complex, it's going to be really hard for somebody else to, you know, if Katey had set this up and then left, and somebody else was just, this dashboard was just dumped on their plate and said, right, this is critical to our business, keep it going. It's so complex that I think it'd be very hard for somebody else to be able to maintain it or modify it or update it. So that's just a word of caution about building spreadsheets that are so complex, is that often it gets beyond the point where anybody else can actually then work on it. And then the one other risk with that is that, you know, if errors creeped in, nobody else would be able to spot them, because there's nobody else sort of able to understand the flow from the sales import data through to this final dashboard. So just a word of caution about really complex sheets is to, you know, it's that balance of how much time am I going to spend on this sheet versus what's the ROI, and then going forward, is there a risk to the business if we become so dependent on this one sheet that only one person understands? You know, is that a risk that we need to be aware of and careful of? But technically, the spreadsheet, this was incredible. Really excellent.
I would add that hopefully that documentation does cover it, so someone could pick up and do it. I did not investigate long enough, Ben, you would know much more than me. But the one piece of feedback, especially in the visualization for me, aside from the 3D, is if you scroll down to the open pipe by stage, I would actually keep this standard to the left, or if you're keeping this funnel shaped, it should be inverted. Oh, you have a negotiation on top now. when I looked at it, somehow I had negotiation on the bottom. Or no, that's right. Sorry, prospecting.
Yeah,
should be up. The funnel should be inverted, is what I'm trying to say. If you keep the funnel form, start with the true top of the funnel. Or if you want to keep it as bars, just keep it standard left would be the only feedback I'd provide.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, we got to jump on to the next one. I will just mention that there's a very fancy report section down here that everyone should check out on their own. You can basically choose all the fields you want on a report. That was another fancy piece that I loved. Great job, Katey. Moving on to Carlos's submission. Again, this is another, all of these are such impressive, amazing looking dashboards. You can glean a lot from the beginning with all these nice KPI boxes at the top. Good use of charts throughout. And I was happy to see this use of table charts, which often people will just put table data in the cells directly, pros and cons to each a little bit, but this does give you some nice flexibility. It's something that you can drag around anywhere on the dashboard. If someone had to make updates, it's easy to change the columns that are being included and so on.
Yeah, just to add there, Frank, as well, I think you can see you've got that scroll bar on the right as well. So you can actually know a lot more data in a small space without having to necessarily use all of those rows. So these table charts are kind of I'm sure they're underused, probably underrated as well. Because don't be afraid to show tables in your dashboards. Really often, you know, a summary table, a small little subset of your data as a table is the best way to show data that people can then just go and see. So this was excellent to see. A nice touch.
Yeah, one part you can't do in these tables, which I love from some of the other dashboards, is hyperlinking directly into Salesforce. I find it very powerful if you can click on an opportunity name, open it in Salesforce, make your edits or change the stage, whatever it is. So with a table chart, I don't think there's any way to hyperlink those, but trade-offs again.
I would recommend adding to the agent level table actually an agent filter. So it could truly be the agent level. That's one thing I noticed. And then I would also include, I would add average age to close and then the number one. We do see the number of open opportunities, number of total. If you added the number of one, we could deduct or deduce what is the number lost for any other questions we might ask from that.
Yeah, great points. One thing, Ben, I'm curious on your thoughts on this, is I noticed this one uses a number of charts, the only combination chart we have access to in Google Sheets currently, unfortunately. Hopefully there'll be more to come. The only one that's available is these bar charts mixed with lines, which I don't always love when it's non-time series or a non-continuous value on the x-axis. Ben, especially, do you think these are effective, or are there any better ways to do this?
Yeah, it's not really a best practice to use the dual axis, you know, where you've got a left axis, which is perhaps amount, and then a right axis, which is count, because in, you know, my experience as well, actually, that you show this to people who are not so data savvy, they don't know which is which, you know, they don't know which line or which column represent, you know, should they be looking to the left axis or the right axis, and it can cause people to, you know, to read off the wrong values, get confused. So yeah, I think just you have to be cautious again using them. Who, you know, again, with dashboards, always your first question should be, who is the intended audience? You know, if it's myself and my colleague who sits next to me who's also technical, then no problem, you can build, you know, technical charts. If it's your boss or the CEO and he's going to glance at this for 1 minute before he rushes into like a super important board meeting, you have to make it super clear, super simple, so that they can just read that information up really quickly and without, you know, with zero chance of any kind of confusion or errors. So, you know, the dashboard has to be built for the intended audience. So yeah, again, just be cautious with these charts where you've got the two axes, because they definitely can cause confusion. And as Frank mentioned, in Google Sheets, they're a little limited in terms of what you can do formatting wise. I like this dashboard a lot though with the design. Again, it was nice and clear and simple, and they've used these really effective scorecards, I think, at the top here to just highlight all of the key metrics that you might be monitoring, and then you've got your filters right there as well, so you can easily control them. So yeah.
Ben, I'd be curious. I was always taught with data visualization, if you scroll down just a little bit, once you start seeing values with the dots, you should make it into a top 5 or top 10 so it's legible, or shorten names abbreviated if that's possible, like a shortened date. But I find those
the other thing, so what Heidi's saying is that, say, along the x-axis of this revenue and opportunities by product, you can't read these these categories. So I would just flip it as well as the other way, and then those are vertical, and often they're easier to read, and then you have to just space them out. But if they do get really wide, then definitely you'll need to shorten them down. For sure.
Yeah, I think we have to jump into the next one, but one other way to do that would be, we didn't have this for this fictional business, but often you would probably have product categories, which might be a easier way to look at this data than to try to list out every single one.
Yeah, I think you could have also just made this dashboard a little bigger, spread things out a little bit more, and then you could have given them a bit more space.
Yeah, very true.
No,
awesome submission, Carlos. Love this one. And on to our 5th finalist, Diego's dashboard. This one just feels very nice when you land in it. I feel like really well organized, and you can tell when someone takes the time to think through the whole structure of the dashboard before they start placing everything. And I think that's what happened here. Great use of slicer filters all across the top, all in one place. Thought that was organized. Again, some KPI boxes with different metrics. Some of these are dynamic, so you can look at win rate by opportunity or by amount, depending on what's useful to your business or your team. Really great color scheme, I think, and great use of charts. This was especially something that I haven't seen such a clear, organized view of before, was this image of a funnel, presumably the exact funnel that this business is using. These are all the stages we provided in the fictional data set. And then with these, well, Google Sheets calls them charts, but they're really scorecards that'll just usually have one number in them, and these are kind of overlaid to give a really nice effect. See how everything's moving through the stages. Of course, these bars aren't proportionally sized like some of the other dashboards that used bar charts to do this, but very very nice aesthetic to it. And you can see how much ends in closed won and closed lost.
So as a RevOps leader, I would definitely recommend removing anything that has to do with IDs, because to any key stakeholder, that's a foreign language to them. They don't understand what ID means or how it's valuable. It isn't a value add for any of the C-suite. So I'd recommend removing that from both the filters and the table. I love, love, love the tickers. Like, just bright red, bright green draws the eyes. You see the trend. You don't have to dig in to figure it out. I think that was fantastic ad. The only other thing I would really, let's see, some of those filters, again, aren't really a value add. I would recommend some more time period analysis. So right now I can see Q2 versus Q1, which is great for quarter over quarter. I personally love to look at Q2 of this year versus Q2 of last year, so I can see the year over year, because the seasonality is going to replicate itself versus a prior quarter, which could be quite different. But this dashboard is fantastic. The UI of it is clean, slick. The coloring with the chocolate, very, very clever.
Yeah, I think the design on this one was, this was the best design. I think it was very, very strong. Really just a clean dashboard to look at. And it tells you that story exactly. I think I mentioned earlier that it's got that funnel showing you very clearly what's going on. All the filters are at the top. It's got a nice coherent color scheme. And it's got those links. Actually, I think Frank, you talked about that as well, that I don't think they actually work in this one because they're not real links back to a real real
we didn't go through the effort of creating a Salesforce org for Dr. Von Brunswick.
But I think that's what Frank was talking about. It's, if you were using this dashboard, you wanted to go and investigate this opportunity, click that link, boom, it takes you just straight to it in Salesforce. So that's a really a nice touch as well.
Yeah, and kind of what Heidi was saying in this point was, instead of opportunity ID, what you might do is put the opportunity name here, and you could even just hyperlink the name straight into Salesforce, make it blue font so it's clear it's a link. But these arrows are also kind of nice.
And then I think the other thing actually that Diego's done with this dashboard is he's picked the current quarter. So this dashboard reflects just that data for this current quarter. So it's, again, a bit like Sebastian had made that opinionated decision to split into open and closed. Diego's said, let's just focus on this quarter data. And again, I like that. I think a dashboard, in most cases, should be fairly specific to answer certain questions for certain people, rather than maybe trying to cover every single imaginable question. So that's, I think, how why we're not seeing maybe a date filter that shows you every single date over time. And I think the way Diego set it up is using the formula today as the basis then for the date, which then rolls along. So when we flip into next quarter, everything will just show that quarter. So you can use that today function as the trigger, if you like, for building the dashboard out. So that's really nice. But definitely the design is really smart on this one, just to take away, the use of the borders, the little tiny chocolate bars were a nice touch, putting the borders around the scorecards, the color scheme, just a very, very strong design, actually. So this was excellent.
Yeah. One really nice touch too that I found was here we see select owner. It looks like a filter. It's actually a highlighter. So maybe we can make that more clear, but it's a really nice Google Sheets technique. And so when we choose a new name here, we're not actually filtering out the other ones. We're simply highlighting the person that we're interested in so we can compare them against the other ones. I think the other colors may be a little bit too hard to see in the background there, but really nice touch. And I'm sure Ben and I know this takes some tricky maneuvering around to get the right data in the right columns to color them differently.
Yes, essentially what you'll do is you'll have your data sets with all of the series, and then you'll have one extra series which is driven by a VLOOKUP or some lookup formula. So that you have all the series gray, and then you have one extra series that you make brown, and that series just changes depending on what the choice is. That's one way to do it. But again, it's a really nice way to show that person amongst all of the others.
Yeah, we can kind of see that here. So we have Lizard Man as the current selection, and we have that repeated again for the chart in its own color. And the only thing we could really criticize on this dashboard was we did notice a couple inconsistencies. Or this chart, for example, is looking at the wrong pivot table. So we get months, and then we suddenly switch into some product names. So I think just a couple things like the ranges that these pivot tables and charts were referring to is occasionally off. So again, getting back to having a beautiful dashboard, but we need, at the top of it all, we need to make sure that the numbers are accurate and are good for making decisions with.
I think we're ready
Awesome.
for winners, Frank.
I think it's about time. Huh? That's the reason everybody is here.
Yes.
But that was such a delight. And thanks again, everyone. Just so fun to dig into all of those spreadsheets. Really, really impressive. And we know that tons of you, even if you didn't make it in the top 5, I looked through every spreadsheet personally, and I can tell you put in a ton of effort and really awesome work. So now we're going to jump into the how we ranked the top 3 out of those 5 finalists, again, based on these 3 criteria: analysis, design, and creativity. So in 3rd place, congratulations, Sebastian, especially scoring high in design, but really overall high in all 3. Really beautiful, clear, easy to read dashboard with a lot of the metrics that we all thought were most important for someone to see. 2nd place, Diego, that last dashboard we all looked at together. Like Ben said, I would agree, it's had the nicest design, and from a RevOps perspective, probably the most useful in my opinion, especially scoring high in the design, which again was factoring in how useful is this to the end user. And now in 1st place, can we get a drum roll or something, Hannah? Congratulations, Katey Adams. That was just a amazingly well thought out dashboard. So many complicated formulas that we all dug into and chased all of your little the paths from one formula to the next to figure it out. But really impressive. The level of detail and organization and explanation is something that a lot of spreadsheet builders, myself included, sometimes miss. And you really did a thorough job of that one. Phenomenal work.
Yeah, well done all 3. Well, well done all 5. Well done everybody who entered. Very high standard of spreadsheet skills. I think, when I looked at all 5 of the finalists, the ones I looked at from each one, I thought, well, that's new. I haven't seen that before, and I'm going to totally take that away and use it myself on my own project. So I really enjoyed looking through them all, and especially well done to the three winners here for some really top work. You can see how much effort everybody's put into these as well. So well done, everybody.
I concur. The perspectives were unique and they were fantastic. I learned a lot and it was just, I didn't know half that was possible, to be honest. So it was really, really impressive. I was blown away.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Big congratulations to our talented winners, Katey, Diego, and Sebastian. So well deserved. And like everyone said, they were all amazing, mind blown internally by every single spreadsheet. So thank you to all the participants who obviously put in a tremendous amount of work and effort and, you know, blew our minds. So Dr. Von Brunswick's Chocolate Factory was the first of many spreadsheet challenges here at Coefficient. So this one will certainly go down in history, but keep your eye out on the next. And last, but definitely not least, a huge thank you to our panel of judges. Thank you, Ben, Heidi, and Frank, for sharing your knowledge and being extremely thoughtful throughout the judging process. It's been a pleasure to have you all with us. And that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, wherever you are out in the world. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.